The other day, I was thinking about Nehemiah chapter 8 and verse 10. And it's a very famous verse. I doubt anybody's been in Christianity for hardly much time that is not familiar with this verse. For the joy of the Lord is our strength. Nehemiah 8:10. I was thinking about that for the last week or so. And then Andre the other day, he shot me a message and he said, Nehemiah 8:10, for the joy of the Lord is your strength. Maybe that's a good thing to talk about. I said, that's funny. I've been thinking about it because that's beautiful. Christians probably know that. But what do they know about it? What do they think it means? And by the way, it doesn't even say joy is your strength, does it? It says the joy of the Lord. Even Nehemiah knew that God was a joyful God and that he had joy. And if we tap into his joy, if we got divine access to his joy, we would be strong. Wow. Remember we looked recently last week or sometime, week before last, we looked at the fruit of the Spirit, and it ends with not self-control, not some kind of moderation, but inner strength. And what is that inner strength? It goes all the way back to the beginning of joy. Now, let me tell you the setting here and just to think about what this verse says. So as we've learned before, Nehemiah is recording for us the return of a remnant of the Jews who've been in exile. They're in apostasy. They apostatized from God. They became unfaithful. They were taken away into captivity. And now they're coming back. And Nehemiah has been given the commission to rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. That's going to be the first stage of the restoration of Israel. And when they get done with building the wall, which, by the way, was under satanic attack, it was under adversarial attack. And when you read the details of Sanballat and all the others who were there to distract them, a lot of it seems pretty benign. Come down, let's have a conversation. Or, we're really concerned about you. Maybe you should go over to the temple for safety. Just simple things, and they seem okay. But it was insidious, trying to get him to stop. You and I have talked about this, Steve. How many things call for our attention. And it's not that they're wrong, but we lose an interest. And our world gets narrower over time because we see something really big. We see something really important. We see the grace of God. We see the joy of God. We see the peace of God. We see the freedom of God. And just like Paul, we become consumed with it. But here they finish the wall, all done. Now Ezra, the priest, comes and he opens up the law and he starts reading out of it. And as he started reading the law, the whole purpose of the law begins to have its effect. The law is about condemnation. The law is about guilt and shame. The law is about you didn't measure up. And so Ezra's reading the law, and all of a sudden, gloom set in on this remnant, and sorrow, and sadness. And they begin to be overcome by it. And Nehemiah steps up and he says, you need to stop this mourning and this sorrow and this sadness. For the joy of the Lord is your strength. It's even under the law, even in the Old Testament, even in the reestablishment of Israel's kingdom, there's an underlying realization that Paul had. Excuse me. There's an underlying realization Nehemiah had that God was a God of joy. And they would not be strong in the law. And they would not be strong in focusing on their efforts of the flesh and how they had failed, their sins, their missing, their failures, their failances, as the Devarsh calls it, their failances. Their strength would not be found there. Their strength was found in the joy of the Lord. Paul came along, and Father made him the champion, the chief of this great joy. He was the chief of sinners. You know, a lot of people, when they read that, Paul's a little side note before we stop. A lot of people read that Paul was the chief of sinners, and they think that means that he was saying he was the worst of sinners. Well, would that even stand up in evaluation of all the ages, that he's the worst sinner who ever lived? And I'll submit to you, the word chief never means worst in any context. If someone's the chief, they're in charge. They're at the top of leadership, of what's going on there. And so he's the chief of sinners. He's our leader. He's the leader. And how did he do it? By Father gave him the administration of the joy of God. And we follow Paul as he followed Christ. And he follows him in joy. And echoes back to a glorious truth that Nehemiah even knew, even under the law, even in shame and sorrow and guilt of human failure, that God is a God of joy. And that's where our strength lies. So if Paul's the greatest communicator of the joy of God, then where will we find our greatest strength in all the books of the Bible? In Paul's, and specifically Ephesians and Colossians, the secret administration of the joy of God.